This is Yardi and Frankel with Honest Reporting, talking to you from Jerusalem. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. I have a clip from the program Democracy Now! Democracy Now! Is a syndicated show. It's heard on the radio throughout the United States and Canada. They have video coverage. People watch their YouTube clips. They have a certain amount of influence, and they bill themselves as a liberal look at the news. This is reporting from a liberal perspective, and I have to tell you, I have no problem with that. If you're liberal, if you're conservative, and you admit it in your coverage, that's fine. What I do have a problem with is if you're reporting things that are not factual, if your reporting is biased. So I thought maybe we'd take a look at just one, this is just a couple days ago, one of their regular pieces on the conflict in Gaza to see how this liberal news organization is reporting. Here we go.
The Palestinian death toll from Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip has passed 815 as new attacks kill more civilians and spark the largest West Bank protests in decades.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there, but you notice how she led the news there. The Israeli assault on Gaza. There's no question of being even-handed or even talking about a cycle. This is simply a one-sided Israeli assault on Gaza. And we're going to lead with Palestinian casualties. We're not going to talk about Hamas. We're not going to talk about rockets. We're not going to talk about Israeli casualties. We are simply going to lead our main item in the news as the Israeli assault on Gaza with the number of Palestinians who have been killed.
On Thursday, at least 16 civilians died and over 200 were wounded when a United Nations shelter was bombed in the Gazan area of Beit Hanun. Palestinian officials have blamed Israeli tank shelling, while Israel has suggested militant rockets were at fault. The UN's declined to directly accuse Israel, but UNRWA spokesperson Christopher Gunn has strongly suggested Israeli shelling was responsible.
Okay. She talks about a United Nations, not a shelter, a school that's being used as a shelter, and how it came under fire. What she leaves out of this report is that in the last few days, twice, these United Nations schools have been found to be used as storage areas for Hamas rockets. That's right, even with United Nations neutrality, these schools were being used by Hamas to store rockets. And what is even more outrageous, and I believe newsworthy, I believe you can't report on the subject of UN schools in Gaza without talking about this. When the UN found these rockets in their schools, what did they do? They'd say they turned them over to the local governing authorities. Well, who is that in the Gaza Strip? That's Hamas. That's the group that's been firing rockets at Israel. In other words, the United Nations found rockets in their schools, which is bad enough, and then gave them to Hamas, who continued firing rockets at Israel. None of this gets mentioned in the report. Now, she says the United Nations has refrained from accusing Israel directly. But this is what she puts in her report.
These are people who have taken shelter in a UN-designated area. The warring parties, particularly the Israelis, were given the precise GPS coordinates. They knew exactly what was going on there, and in spite of that, this has happened. We again say enough civilians, enough women, enough children. They have suffered quite enough in this appalling conflict.
Overall,
I agree. I agree. We all agree. Enough casualties. We don't want to see a single more casualty, Israeli or Palestinian. But we're not going to get that while Hamas still has rockets, while they still dig tunnels underneath the border, where they're still committed to terrorism and the murder of Israelis. Now, she says that the United Nations is not accusing Israel directly, and then she uses Gunnis, the UN spokesperson in Gaza, who says Israel had the coordinates. They knew there were refugees there. In other words, he is accusing Israel directly. So on the one hand, the Democracy Now! Anchor says that the United Nations have not accused Israel, and then she runs a clip where this is exactly what they do.
At least 119 people were killed Thursday in Israeli strikes on Gaza. The attack in Beit Hanun helped trigger the largest West Bank protest in years. Up to 50,000 people were said to have marched from Ramallah towards Jerusalem. 2 Palestinians were killed and over 200 wounded when Israeli soldiers fired live ammunition at the protesters.
Now, this is something that I've got firsthand experience, unfortunately, with. She's giving this report as if there's a protest out there and the Israeli soldiers are responding by firing live ammunition into a crowd. And if you have an image of a bunch of people holding signs, that kind of protest, maybe they're singing, that's not what we're talking about here. Last night, I was driving not far from my home, the road between Beit Shemesh and Gush Etzion, where I live, and it goes by an Arab village. And as I'm driving up the hill, there's a crowd of Palestinians by the side of the road. And then I realize they are throwing Molotov cocktails, bottles filled with gasoline, with rags stuffed in them on fire. They are throwing them at the cars. Now, I got out of there as fast as I could, found the nearest army checkpoint, told them what was going on, and they responded. They sent the jeeps in. They sent soldiers in. When you hear a report like this, they were protesting, Israel fired live ammunition, that's because these protests are mobs who are seeking violence. They are seeking to kill. I can tell you as somebody who last night's life was threatened that I hope the Israeli soldiers will do everything necessary to protect life. But the bottom line is, as I said before, I don't mind reporting from a liberal point of view, but since when did liberal mean anti-Israel? Since when did the word Israel mean pro-Hamas, pro-terror? That's wrong. That doesn't make any sense in the world. How can they call themselves? If anything, a liberal news organization should be reporting Israel's side. Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. Wouldn't it make sense that they would at least give both sides of this conflict and talk about why Israel is even in Gaza in the first place? I've got contact information down below on how to contact Democracy Now! Please do, because we cannot let this one-sided, biased, what passes for reporting pass without notice. This is Yardane Frankel with Honest Reporting. Thank you.